The groceries had been heavier than I expected. I'd hurried inside, dropped the bags on the counter, and collapsed on the couch without checking the lock. By the time I realized it, hours had passed. It felt unnecessary to get up again, an odd laziness that would haunt me later. At midnight, I woke to a sound, faint shuffling, like feet on the carpet. I sat up, listening. Maybe it was the upstairs neighbor or a gust from the open window in the next room. I told myself that and stayed still, barely breathing. Then I heard it. A faint, uneven exhale. My chest tightened. The sound was too close. Someone was in the living room. Panic swept over me. My phone was on the kitchen counter, out of reach. I slid off the bed, moving slowly, careful not to make noise. I locked the bedroom door as quietly as I could and crawled under the bed, my heart hammering. For what felt like hours, I stayed there, straining to hear. Drawers opened and closed, papers rustled, my backpack's zipper whined, every sound scraped against my nerves. Whoever it was didn't rush. They were methodical, deliberate. I fought the urge to scream, to move, to do anything but stay hidden. My breath was shallow and controlled. Any noise from me, and they'd know. The footsteps came closer. They paused outside the bedroom door. The knob jiggled softly, then stopped. I bit down on my lip, praying the lock would hold. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps retreated. The living room sounds resumed, the intruder rummaging through my life like it was a thrift store. I didn't sleep. I didn't even close my eyes. Every muscle was tense, ready to spring if the door gave way. Eventually, the noises stopped. The front door creaked open, then shut softly. Silence followed. I waited. Minutes, hours, until the first rays of sunlight lit the room. Only then did I crawl out from under the bed, legs stiff and shaking. I listened again, holding my breath. Nothing. I forced myself to open the door. My apartment was a wreck. Drawers emptied, books scattered, groceries still on the counter. My laptop sat untouched, but smaller things, my wallet and spare keys, were gone. Then I saw the mirror. Written in bold, messy strokes of lipstick were 5 words, "You should lock your doors!" The air left my lungs. My knees buckled, and I sat on the floor staring at the words. The police came later, took a report, and asked questions I couldn't answer. No one had seen anything. That night I sat in the same apartment, every lock secured, but I couldn't shake the feeling. They had been there, inside my space, breathing my air. And I'd left the door open for them. The warehouse was always quiet at night, a sprawling maze of shelves and shadows. My job was simple. Watch the cameras, patrol the aisles, and lock up when the shift ended. Most nights, I saw nothing but flickering lights and the occasional rat darting across the floor. That night started the same. I sat in the tiny security office, sipping lukewarm coffee and staring at the screens. At first, it was just a flicker in the corner of one feed, a shadow moving too quickly to make sense. I leaned closer and rewound the footage, but it was gone. Probably nothing, I muttered to myself, though my pulse quickened. I resumed watching, eyes scanning the screens. A minute later, I saw it again, a faint blur in one of the farthest aisles. This time, I switched the camera feed, zooming in. The movement stopped. I told myself it was a trick of the light, but the faint noise began, shuffling, almost like footsteps. I checked my watch. 12:17 a.m. I grabbed my flashlight and headed out. The air inside the warehouse felt colder than usual. The shelves loomed high, their contents casting long shadows that shifted with my light. The shuffling grew louder as I approached the far end, where pallets were stacked haphazardly. I turned a corner and froze. There, behind a low shelf, were makeshift beds, old blankets, flattened cardboard, and a few empty cans. Nearby, a pile of wrappers and half-eaten food sat in a corner. Someone had been living here. The thought chilled me. I stepped back slowly, keeping my flashlight steady, heart pounding in my chest. Then I heard it, a whisper. "You weren't supposed to find this!" The voice was low, calm, and far too close. I spun around, but the beam of my flashlight only caught empty aisles. My breath caught, and I backed away faster, nearly stumbling over the blankets. My hands trembled as I turned, heading for the nearest exit. The whisper came again, echoing softly. This time, it was distant, but It wasn't alone. More voices joined in, murmuring words I couldn't make out. I ran. My boots echoed on the concrete floor as I sprinted back to the security office. Slamming the door shut, I locked it and collapsed into the chair. My lungs burned as I stared at the monitors. Every camera feed now showed movement, faint figures darting between shelves, always just out of focus. One screen showed the security office door. A shadow passed by. I didn't wait to find out what would happen next. I grabbed my car keys, bolted out the back exit, and didn't stop running until I reached my car. I quit the next day. Weeks later, I heard the warehouse had been shut down. No one said why, but sometimes I think about that night, about the makeshift beds, the whispers, and the shadow outside the office door. I wasn't watching them. They had been watching me. I'd always felt safe in my neighborhood, quiet, friendly, predictable. But that night, everything changed. It was just after midnight when I heard it, a faint clatter from the backyard. I muted the TV and listened. Nothing. Probably a raccoon knocking over the trash can again, I thought. I stood, stretching, and moved to the kitchen window to check. The motion sensor light over the garden flickered weakly, casting long shadows. I squinted but saw nothing unusual. The shed stood as it always had, the trash cans upright. Still, the light flickering bothered me. I grabbed my phone and texted my neighbor, Tom. "Hey, hearing noises. You up?" No reply. As I turned to go back to the living room, the sound came again, a faint, metallic scrape. Closer this time. My chest tightened, but I told myself not to panic. I walked to the back door, careful not to turn on any lights inside, and peeked out again. That's when I saw it. A figure crouched low beside the garden shed. They weren't moving, just sitting there. Too still. My breath caught in my throat. My hand trembled as I fumbled to lock the door, my eyes never leaving the shadowy shape. I dialed 911 with shaky fingers, my voice low but urgent. "There's someone in my yard." The operator asked me questions. Was I safe? Was the person armed? I didn't know. All I could do was describe the motionless figure and wait. The minutes felt endless. The figure finally shifted, rising slightly before ducking back into the shadows. I pressed myself against the wall, heart racing, afraid they'd seen me. Finally, red and blue lights painted the street outside. I unlocked the front door and waved the officers in, pointing them toward the backyard. They moved quickly, flashlights cutting through the dark. I stayed inside, too scared to follow. Then I heard shouting, a brief struggle, and the sound of handcuffs clicking. An officer came back to update me. "We found him by the shed," he said. "Homeless man, armed with a knife." I nodded, words failing me. "And this," he added, holding up a crumpled piece of paper sealed in a plastic bag. It was a list. Several addresses were written down, including mine. Beside my address, in shaky handwriting, were the words, "Midnight only." My stomach turned. The officer assured me the man was in custody and that I wasn't in immediate danger, but it was little comfort. That list, those words, felt like a violation. A reminder that even in the safest places, safety isn't guaranteed. That night, I didn't sleep. Every sound, every shadow seemed menacing. The shed's door was replaced the next day, locks were added, and cameras were installed. But the unease never left because now I knew. Someone had been watching me, and I hadn't even realized.